Hey everyone, this is Randy Kim from the Banh Mi Chronicles podcast. So today I am joined with an old friend that I know from the podcasting world, Patrick Armstrong. I've known Patrick for about a few years now, and actually to tell you about who Patrick is a storyteller and entrepreneur. He is the host and producer of two award-winning podcasts, Conversation Piece, which explores the city of Indianapolis through the perspective of its people, and the Janchi Show, which amplifies and celebrates the Asian adoptee experience. Through conversation-based media and storytelling in all forms, Patrick works to provide new perspectives on the world and people around us and empower both individuals and organizations to meet each other, not with fear and judgment, but with love and affirmation. So, Patrick, welcome to the show. I am really glad to, hear from you. It's been kind of a while since we've had like of an audio conversation, so to speak, or verbal
100%.
conversation. And I actually knew you. Well, we actually knew each other through Jerry Wan from Dear Asian
Hmm.
Americans several years ago,
Yep.
and he had selected both of us to be part of his panel on Asian American podcasting and storytelling for podcast movement in 2022 in Dallas, and this is how we connected. And I've always been a fan of your work. I've always felt that you've been very frank and honest about your Korean American adoptee experiences, but
Thank you.
also really diving deeper into the political and social landscape. And I think that is very much needed right now. But I think the first question for me or to you is, how are you surviving 2025 with only like not even a few months left?
Well, before I answer that question, I did want to say I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. It's a big privilege and it's a joy to sit down and have a conversation again. It has been a while. We
Mhm.
have exchanged DMs and messages back and forth over the past couple years, but we have not had a chance to do this. So, it's a big honor because you've had some really notable conversations, and I feel very like I said, it's a privilege to be able to come onto your platform and have a conversation with you. So thank you. Um, I'm also trying to catch up to you in impeccable style with my dress. So if you see this stuff pop up on my timeline, just know that Randy has been influencing me.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
100%. How am I surviving 2025? Well, in 2024, I became a parent,
Hmm.
and I think this year, him being a year plus going on 2 years old now, I think the way that I have been surviving has been trying to just like consistently reorienting myself to the center of him. And so, where I understand that the universe doesn't revolve around a single person, in this current moment, it does help me. My grounding element, my center of my universe is my child. So it's very helpful to be able to have something like that to get me to continue forward, because I think there have, even in this state, been moments where I've felt like I don't want to. It's like it'd be nice to not have to do any of this anymore, like,
Hmm.
and not have to live life in this way. And I think pre-parenthood Patrick would have really struggled in this moment
Hmm.
with this question, to be able to answer this question. And I think I feel very lucky to be in the state of life that I am, to be able to ground myself when it comes to getting through each day.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for, giving us some light as to how you're, navigating through it, especially as a young father, and congratulations on
Thank you.
being a parent. And, when I stepped away from the podcast like 2 years ago, I remembered at the time I was feeling burned out, which I have been on the podcast game for 4 years, which is like if you in dog years, that's like 40 years.
40
And
years. Yeah, I was gonna say.
and I have seen so many fellow Asian American and BIPOC podcasters just leave, the scene. And at that time, I was also thinking the podcasting journey of where the podcasting world has become a joke, at least in my opinion, because I felt that there's a lot of rage baiting, there's a lot of like fringe right-wing voices that have
Yeah.
been infiltrating the airwaves. And then when the election came of last year, it really made me realize how much those voices have been penetrating among Gen Z folks and
Mm,
and other voters who, feel in some ways isolated, and also because, this was during a very different period of time, the way we, consume media.
sure.
Traditional media outlets were basically brushed aside, and podcasts have like taken over the center. Podcast listening is a very solitary experience, as I think about this. And I
That's a
wonder,
great point.
yeah, I wonder, like when I got back, I think for me, I came back into this landscape. I decided to do Substack, and I realized that Substack, also hosts a podcast, which I thought was appealing to me. And I felt that there was this need for me, along with other content creators, to intercept harmful narratives that are happening against marginalized communities. And I'm very curious about what has your evolving look like as a podcaster the past few years, especially as a male podcaster, because we hear podcasters a bunch of like straight white men, just having their grievances. I'm very curious about like your take on what has that world looked like for you as a podcaster and content creator.
Totally. I think that unlike, so I guess I just actually talked about this with someone else recently, but so my whole like professional experience, there is no like consistency other than me leaving a job. So I constantly bounce between careers, mostly in customer service and sales, but just kind of all over the place, and never really built something of my own that I had.
Mhm.
And so when I started podcasting, when we started the Janchi Show in September of 2020, that became my thing. And like most people, most podcasters, it can become kind of a slog, I think, after a certain time, especially if you're doing it weekly and you don't take breaks, like there is no seasonality to it. For me, I don't think I ever felt the burnout of that because I didn't have something to fall back on.
Mm,
The podcasting, the storytelling aspect, the conversation of it all, that to me, that was my thing. And I felt like I had never had a thing before. My
mm,
wife is a teacher. She's an educator. She comes from a family of educators, and that's like her passion. Like she has done other jobs, and I'm just like, that's not your thing. Like you are really passionate about that, and it shows. And I
mm,
think podcasting has become that for me. When I started Conversation Piece, it had been 2 years on from doing the Janchi Show, and I wanted creative control over my own thing.
mm,
And so I was still really invested in the conversation aspect of it. Because, kind of like you and your thoughts right now, especially examining the landscape, it felt like to me when I got the mic for the first time, and then when we were actually having the ability to share and elevate other voices, I was realizing like I had been kind of just dismissed and stonewalled and marginalized from ever being empowered to share my voice in the first place.
mhm,
And so as I had been doing the podcasting, I was like, okay, if this is my thing, like I want to make sure I don't ever become that roadblock and that in any way. So where like if I stepped away from the game, is that me now becoming the roadblock to other voices that might need to be heard? Obviously, I can look at it from the perspective of me stepping out of the way, but at the same time, I'm not falling back to something. And so when like 2023 rolls around, 2024 rolls around. Donald Trump gets elected into office again. You see violent rhetoric amped up immediately, not only before the election, but immediately after the election. Um, and then you hear a lot of the discourse about the manosphere in podcasting. So the Joe Rogans, the Andrew Schultz, like again, that right wing like arm of media, of alternative media. And I think the New York Times put out an article that had like a bubble chart
mm,
of male podcasters, and like the whole thing was red. And then there was
mm,
like a couple blue dots in there. I think Hassan Piker, even though he's a streamer, not really a podcaster, I think he was
mhm,
on there. I'm trying to think of the other people. Brian Tyler Cohen, I think, was on there.
mm,
There's just a couple of like liberal, like pretty large following folks or leftists or whoever, however you'd like to describe them. And I came across an interview on a podcast, and the guest was Brennan Lee Mulligan. He's of Dungeons and Dragon, of Dimension 20 fame, and he was talking about this topic. And he said that for a long time we were giving people shit about starting a podcast, and the joke was like, "Oh God, here comes another podcast."
Hmm.
And the thing that we're realizing now is like, oh, we probably shouldn't have been saying that. We should have been
Hmm.
telling people to do your podcast, because we have now become, because okay, so the reason I brought up all that stuff at the beginning was because unintentionally we kind of like sideline people from, okay,
Hmm.
these conversations are necessary in a way that like the Joe Rogans of the world have been invested into, and not even affirmed, but just been like, stay over here, but just keep doing it. Don't stop what you're doing, but just do it over here, and we're gonna feed off of that. And so like I totally agree with you, and I love that you're stepped back into the space, because 100% we need people to create, step onto a platform, use their voice in whatever way, tell their story, because we are in the midst of active erasure of communities, of the
Hmm.
histories of communities.
Hmm.
And the only way that we make sure, like, we will survive it, like, all of our communities will survive it. But the way that we ensure that we do, and that we can act, and I think that we can be actively fighting back against narrative, is by using your voice, sharing your voice, telling
Hmm.
your story, and then like collaborating with or amplifying other people's stories and voices that are outside of your experience,
Hmm.
particularly a Palestinian voice right now,
Hmm.
especially Jewish voices that are in support of Palestinian life, and support or reject the genocide currently being done by Israel. So, um, I think, I don't know. That was a really long-winded answer. I felt like there's a lot of context in there of the shifting landscape,
Hmm.
and I wanted to make sure that I was doing my thing. But it's just like, I agree with you. I think we need as many voices now. I think it becomes infinitely harder because we we're so far behind, like the eight ball or whatever the analogy is, when it comes to pushing back on the narrative. I think about it as an adoptee and trying to overcome the dominant narrative of adoption. Damn near impossible, because that has been the way that society at large has thought about adoption. Everything is good. It's all positive. It's all love for over or over 50 years, damn near a century, I would say, just of regular thinking about it that way. To push back on that now and expect it to change in 5 years, 10 years, that's tough. Like the 100 years of narrative that we're fighting against, the 200, the 400 years of narrative, of anti-black narrative that we're fighting against, will probably take 800 years to
Hmm.
truly shift and eradicate. So
Hmm.
I think the more people that find themselves empowered and put into positions of safety and bravery to use their voice, the better.
Mm. I really appreciate you sharing this, especially from a fellow podcaster and what you have been experiencing too. Because, like, when I have gone to universities, when I've done talks on podcasts for the past 2 years, I would always ask students what Asian American students mostly, and I would ask them, "Who do you listen to?" And
Mm,
I'm always gonna get that one student that's gonna say Joe Rogan, and I'm just like literally cringing, and I have no poker face whatsoever. And so I have this disgusted look on my face, and I'm like, okay, just bring it down, just calm down. Let me try to have a nicer way, or actually not a nicer way, but have a different way of saying or what the value a podcast can bring, especially when there's so many important voices like yours
yeah,
and that are not just opening up much needed dialogue and intercepting harmful narratives, but also like, setting the stage of ideas, creation, and, sparking something. And I think that's something that I have always been very enamored by with, conversations and what it can create. But also I think it's very important to know who's doing the work and
for sure.
giving the blueprint, because I think when I always hear, well, I don't know who's doing the work, or I did not know ICE was targeting Asian people, like this is where we have to like step in and be like, no, this is not true. This is what's really happening. Here's the stories behind it, and this is how you can help to support and to like really funnel in more of the resources to support folks like that. And also, we do need to support content creators who are actually doing good work. I think that's also something that's very much missing.
For
And
sure.
you talk about your adoptee experience and something to go back to, but I'm very curious about your own experiences growing up being a Korean adoptee in the Midwest, being raised by white parents, and what were you taught about your own Asian identity growing up from your parents, from your adopted family?
Yeah, so I don't really feel like I ever remember being taught much about Korean identity. To my parents' credit, I will say they kept everything that was sent with them or with us. I have a younger sister who's also adopted from Korea, not biologically related to me. Sent with us from Korea. So there's like little hanboks, some pamphleted information, I think like a book, a little doll. But as far as like those conversations went when we were growing up, we I would say there really wasn't any.
Mm,
The one memory I have of us ever doing anything like actively going somewhere to do an Asian thing. I don't remember where it was. I think it was in Lafayette, but I was probably like 5, 6 maybe, and it was a Korean culture convention. And I don't remember what we did there. I just remember leaving and feeling very like shameful and uncomfortable. Like I really didn't feel like I was wanted to be there. And I think that I don't remember having a conversation, but I think my parents saw that. And to them, because they were also taught by adoption agencies and just the rhetoric of adoption and families, that you love your kid. And when your kid is upset or uncomfortable, you don't, especially in the 90s, you're not being like, okay, let's sit in the discomfort. Let's see what that's about. You're like, okay, let's never do that again. Like,
mm.
we're going to forget about that. And I think that's kind of how we approached it. And that really set me down the path of rejecting my identity wholesale. And
Mm,
so I never felt comfortable being Asian. The only ways that I ever really did that were just to lean into stereotype or hard reject stereotype in like a joking manner, where I was
mm,
clearly being microaggressive against myself. But it was
mm,
in order to fit in with everybody
mm,
else because that's what they were saying, like all my friends and stuff. And again, to my parents' credit, like they are really good people
mm,
and they like raised us in a colorblind way. We grew up in a predominantly white community. Like that's the way that they lived their life. And if racist things did happen that were explicit, like that was a quick, we're going to shut that down. Like we are obviously support you. We're stand up against that. But if something more subtle were to happen or like it came off or was perceived of as a joke,
mm,
um, it was always, well, they didn't really mean it that way, or you're probably taking that the wrong way, or you're being too sensitive. And that was not just from my parents, but from literally everyone in my life. And those things really like informed the way I thought about being Asian. And so like
mm,
yeah, like complete rejection wholesale. And it wouldn't be until like 30 years old and the
mm.
Janchi Show and everything that I started to change that.
Yeah, and also in context, like you're in your mid 30s, so it hasn't really been long at all.
Yeah.
And I it's something that I resonate to certain extents because even though I am not an adoptee, I wasn't raised by white parents, but I did grow up in a predominantly white community and I was both Vietnamese and Cambodian and
Mm,
like that the relations between both countries have always been very uncomfortable. So I always felt like I was the bastard child. So I felt like
sure.
I had to stay the hell away from you know, from a lot of my community members, and I wasn't around it. And I think that like there's this assimilation of trying to fit in, and I, like you, I was trying to very hard to reject my Asian identity. I never ate pho until I was actually after college, believe it or
Damn.
not,
Me too.
and
Actually, me too.
wow.
So I'm in that boat, but I'm also not Vietnamese. So I totally am like, I totally get that.
Yeah, so I had to think back about God. I was trying so hard to fit in with my cool white classmates who I don't think are cool anymore, to be honest with you. Let's be very honest.
For sure.
Um, and I wanted desperately to have validation. And even
Yes.
during the validation, when I would get, made jokes about my culture, about my identity, I felt this strong need to be like to go with it and just deal with it. And I remembered like even as an intern for NBC Sports Network, I don't know what they've changed the names several times already, but like I was an intern and the whole marketing department was white. And I just remembered I did not have the background, the network to understand this world. And I
Mm,
realized how fitting in end up nearly costing me mentally. And I think it took me until, gosh, I think I was living in Korea as an expat unexpectedly. And that was when I was around Asian expats, from
sure.
America, from Australia. And that's kind of where I started to see, okay, I think I'm finding some level of belonging. And then when I got back to Chicago, I felt like I had to completely change the narrative. Like I was becoming more open with my queerness. I was becoming more assertive. Like I need to find a queer Asian space. And I need to have that. I felt like that was what I needed. And I was almost 30 years old, and I'm now
Mm,
like 42. So it's very interesting how it's very similar there. It took us nearly
yeah.
that long to start the process of unlearning, decolonializing, and really having to shift what our alignments are. So I think that is very interesting. So
Can
what
I
was,
ask you a question real
go ahead,
quick?
go ahead.
Um, so I actually, when I was in college, while I was rejecting my Asianness, I started to become more liberal, and so like I
Mm,
learned about like specifically like the horrid politics of the 80s and Reagan and everything that he did
mhm,
to black communities in America,
mhm,
as well as communities all over the world. Learning about from literally First Nations peoples that taught a class at Purdue
mhm,
about what happened to indigenous people here in America for the first time. And it was really like when I reflect now, it's really interesting to me to think about how I was becoming more radicalized um, in every way but my own identity. And
mm,
because I was not becoming radicalized with myself,
mm,
my like allyship or advocacy, I think, was kind of performative. It was pretty performative at a level because
mm,
I was
mm,
not advocating for myself. So how could I truly advocate for another community? So my
mm,
question to you is, like you
mhm,
said, you came back from Korea around 30 and you're like, I'm going to start finding and seeking this out intentionally. Were you becoming more liberal, more radicalized? I don't even like the word radical anymore. Were you becoming more like progressive, I
mhm,
guess, in
mhm.
your viewpoints in
Yeah.
that period between like post high school in college and then coming back from Korea?
Oh, big time,
Okay.
actually. Big time. Because where I grew up in the suburbs of Chicagoland, it was in DuPage County. It was then
Okay. Yep.
the most conservative district, county in the US. I mean, it spawned like Henry Hyde. It spawned like some, I don't know who the Speaker of the House, Ted Hass. I think Dennis Hasser, who's currently,
Mm,
is he,
okay.
I don't know if he's alive, but I know he was sitting in jail, deservedly so. Um, but it, like I was taught a lot about homophobia, especially during the AIDS, after the AIDS or
Okay.
during the AIDS crisis. And as someone who's closeted, I was so busy trying to like fit a normative hetero situation. So I felt like I was trying to be more conservative or moderate to try to fit in a particular narrative that a lot of my
Okay.
peers were following. And when I went to college, I first went to college to DuPage. I was not quite there because it was still in DuPage County, and I wasn't quite evolved in my way of thinking. I was just trying to learn how to be social on my own because I
Sure.
had very protective parents in high school and I had to finally rebel from that. So I had to learn how to actually talk to people
Yeah.
and actually have a conversation. And so I was learning that. And then in UIC, University of Illinois in Chicago, I mean, it's a derogatory nickname, but they call it the University of Indians and Chinese because it has a large Asian population. White people are in the minority. But the funny thing is that I was an English major, or I was going into teaching of English at the time, and it was fairly quite white. So I wasn't around a lot of Asian people in my circle. But my politics really did change. I think when I went to the UIC Writing Center, I've been exposed to so many different activists, college
Mm,
activists. Um, I had my professor, his name is Luis Alberto Arrea, who, is a author, and he had spoken about immigration. And at that time, the immigration movement was starting to build up in the
yeah.
mid 2000s. And so I was starting to become more aware. And at that time, before President Obama became president, he was a senator. So I think that there was a growing shift within my group that was gearing
Sure.
towards it.
Oh, okay.
I was exposed to more ideas back in the day, and I think when I went to Korea and coming back, funny enough that I actually worked for a Korean American organization that dealt with immigration and advocacy rights, that actually started to really change my politics and undo a lot of harmful thinking and practices that I don't resonate anymore prior to 25. So that, yeah, by the time I hit 30, I was already starting to make a very different
Mm.
inroad. And I was like, yeah, this definitely makes more sense to me. This is where I feel more compelled and where I feel more belonging. But I feel like this is where I am more of myself.
I appreciate you sharing that. And one thing that you said, I just want to touch on real quick because I think it put something into place for me. You said that your the circle of the group of people that you were in were becoming like were shifting, like their
Hmm.
politics and their
Oh,
ideas
yes.
were shifting. While I was becoming more liberal, more progressive in my thinking and viewpoints, like I said, I felt like it was performative
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I was not getting out of my comfort zone of the circle of friends that I brought with me from high school to college. And I say brought with me, I came back from a different college to come be in that group, essentially. And so while I was the only one shifting, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Whereas I didn't have other people shifting with me, and then I
Hmm.
was too afraid to
Hmm.
get out of my circle of comfort in order to find those people that could have maybe helped
Hmm.
me have a realization that I had at 30 at 25 or at 22.
Hmm.
However, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now had that
Right.
not happened the way it went.
Hmm.
And like, it's just interesting to think about. I haven't thought about that before, but when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, it's because I was not, I was hanging around the same people who were not shifting their viewpoints.
Yes, yes.
So,
And I think that's something that I had to start recognizing. And yeah, there's a lot of people pleasing tendencies in me. And I think that's very common in our community, no matter what layer of the Asian American
yep.
journey that you're on. It's obviously nonlinear. And but there is a people pleasing tendency. Like, yes, we want the acceptance, we want the approval from our families, our peers.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time, like with longtime white friends to really understand because I was starting to slowly, subconsciously break away from that. And it's like, okay, well, I
Mm,
am starting to do things that probably will make them uncomfortable. And I was very scared of trying to lose friendships. But I think when Trump got elected, that's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to continue going further. I'm not going to look back. And I wonder about like, when you think of yourself, from your adoptee experiences, you had learned so much in the last couple of years. I know that you went to Korea a couple of years ago. I know that was a very
yeah.
difficult experience, and I'm wondering about how did it view your relationship with the ancestral homeland?
Sure. This is a very timely question because the day we're recording this, news just broke. The
Mhm.
president of South Korea just publicly apologized to adoptees.
Mhm.
And I had a few months ago guested on my own show to talk about my experience, and somebody asked me about my relationship with Korea, like how do I feel or what do I love about the country. And so I say all that because when I went back and had my experience, both experiences, so I went in October of 2022 and July of 2023.
Mhm.
Um, I I experienced what I wanted to experience over those 3 weeks in total.
Mhm.
And I realized the realization I had there was that all the work I had done over 3 years to like become to accept myself and to start living as what I thought was the most whole version of myself, and had reached the mountaintop. I
Hmm.
was standing on the peak, baby, going to Korea that second time. I was ready to plant the flag, and I'm like, yes, we're gonna do it. And then I was there, and I came back, and I realized, oh shit, like I maybe climbed a little hill, and like there is much more mountain to climb. And
Hmm.
so as I was doing that work, that's what prompted my therapy journey to begin, and a lot of other things, a lot of writing and stuff that I've been doing, and a lot of reflection on the way I feel uh, about my relationship to Korea specifically. And
Hmm.
so I would describe it as an arm's length relationship
Hmm.
with the motherland, with the homeland, and I think that the people of Korea, I don't really have an issue with because I
Hmm.
don't know them in that
Hmm.
way. And I've not had enough time, the privilege of time, to be able to get to know them in that way, literally, physically in the country itself,
Hmm.
like being immersed in the country in that way. So I can't say. However, when I think about the country, I think about being sent away. And
Hmm.
not just myself. I think about every kid that got sent overseas or whatever happened to them, and that makes me angry. And
Hmm.
so I realize that those things exist in the same space. I also realize that that anger in what I feel towards a just general sense of Korea um, is also a hindrance. While valid, is a hindrance to me being able to embrace it in the way that I wanted my parents to, so that I could experience it the way my kid needs to, or I hope can
Hmm.
experience it.
Hmm.
And so, like, I'm really struggling right now to figure out how do I start incorporating these elements of things of Korean culture that I just myself really struggle to connect with, so that my kid does not grow up with the same lack of that.
Yeah.
And so, so another side of this coin is when I think about Korea, I also think about how I think about the concept of Han. And so have you heard, do you know the concept? Okay,
I
so for
know Han means like one in Korea.
Oh, okay. So Han is a like a concept in Korea. It also means it's notoriously been difficult to define. But it's like a deep like yearning or like a strong emotional pull, generally like a maybe not negative, but like solemn, I guess I'll say. The best definition I ever heard for it though but was a fractured identity.
Mm.
Han is a fractured identity because the country itself is split in two,
Mm.
and the country itself is not whole. And so
Mhm.
until we can, and everyone born of in the country is born of this break of our culture, of our
Mm.
community, of our ancestry.
Mm.
Um, and everyone carries a little bit of that with them. And so until we can mend that, and it
Mm.
doesn't really feel like that seems possible at the moment,
Mm.
we're always going to carry that. And as an adoptee, that really resonated with me because
Mhm.
I felt like that was what I lived for a long time,
Mhm.
was this fracture. And
Mm.
so when I think about Korea, I think about all of these different things. I think about the anger that I feel towards the general sense of it. I think about this deep yearning for wholeness because we come from a history, a place that has been broken apart. And then I think about like how these things outside of my control now influence what I do control and my own journey with the Korean culture and community uh, in the way that that is going to affect my
Mm.
and not ancestors. What is it, the people that come after my lineage? I don't know.
Lineage,
My
I
kids,
guess.
yeah, my kids, their kids, whoever, if they happen to have kids, if that line continues, like I don't want to then perpetuate that fracture. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so I'm trying, and again, it's a struggle because like I carry that. We all carry that, and I'm trying to figure out how to mend that
Mm.
too, because now it is not just about me when it comes to how this is tied together. There's another thread in this loop that needs to be involved in tying the right knot, and
Mm.
so that requires my string to reinforce itself and open itself up to things that maybe we were closed off for or to for a long time.
Mm, gosh, like I feel like you're activating so many emotions in my head right now because yeah, I think of Vietnam and to some extent with Cambodia, but
Sure.
Vietnam and Korea, they had gone through violent foreign intervention, with the US and with Russia and China but like it's no accident when I think of the adoptee culture. I don't even know how to
Yeah.
name it,
Experience.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was also stemmed from what happened with the wars, with Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the environment that it created, like,
Mm,
and the forced migration on top of it.
yep.
And it's it's like when you talk about going back to Korea, like for me, going back to Vietnam and then Cambodia for the first time as an adult by myself, I had to think of how did I lose myself along the way? What was I missing that I'm trying to get back in some ways,
Mm,
And Cambodia was probably more sensitive for me because I don't have any family members. A lot of them were killed during the genocide. So I felt like I was kind of walking into a memorial. And I was telling my
mm,
therapist, right before that, like, I don't know if I can handle this kind of weight because, I know
totally.
my dad talks about his story about nearly getting killed. And I'm like thinking, God, I could have been like seconds away from not existing.
Mm,
So I think about my relationship with those two countries, specifically with Cambodia, and like how, the fracture of what has happened through wars, through genocide, um, through very divisive political ideologies have really, shaped our behavior, our way of thinking, and living in America, where we are in a place where, yeah, this is a place that actually pushed a lot of my our families out or separated, and
yeah.
it's something that I also have to reckon with. Like, what do we do with our voice in this day and age, and
Mm,
how do we uncover the very difficult truths that we were not taught, and how do we try to heal those wounds and create a space to heal the wounds of so many. And I'm very curious about your relationship with both the Korean American, Korean diasporic, and really Korean adoptee communities, like your different relationships with each of them and how you navigate your identities, the intersecting identities. And I'm very curious about what that looks like for you.
for sure. I love answering this question because I feel like it literally changes every single time somebody asks me. So I would say I'm gonna start local. I'm gonna go out. I'm actually
Mhm.
gonna start really hyper, and then we're gonna zoom out a little bit. I have been struggling. So I have been really good in the last year or so about connecting with and building inroads and community with the broader Asian diaspora here in Indianapolis. That's something that I never had, that I didn't know existed, and as I continue to discover the wide, rich diversity of people from the entire continent, including the third largest population of Burmese folks outside of the country
Mhm.
here in Indiana.
Mhm.
Um, Shout out to the South Side. As I've discovered the community, I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I want. And it's been really interesting because that hasn't really always included the Korean American community.
Mhm.
It's been more broadly Asian or Asian diasporic. And I say that because it goes to how I identify, and I identify first as Asian American and then as Korean. Even though I know I'm ethnically Korean, I generally say I'm an Asian American adoptee via South Korea or via adoption from South Korea. And I say that because, like, again, I've just been struggling to connect with that culture, with everything with it when it comes to Korea, with my own feelings about just everything about it. And I realized, like, when I learned the history of the term Asian America or Asian American and where that came from out of the civil rights movement, out of a way of not generalizing, but really being hyper specific about hey, we're made up of 50 countries. Like, we're going to bring all our people together and support y'all. Like, realizing it came out of resistance. It came out of like this fight
Mhm.
to be known, to be heard, but also to be in community with others. I'm like, that's what I resonate with. And so there's Korean in that for sure. That's just how it's fallen for me. Now, as we scale out a little bit, the wider Korean American community, I have a lot of Korean American friends. I have more Korean American friends than any other demographic of Asian sub diaspora or sub community, and I think that just kind of happened because I came to all of this via or during the pandemic. And so all of it was virtual. My hyper local situation was nothing because we were all inside. Nobody was going to places. So was really only connecting with people everywhere but Indiana. So
Mm.
that's kind of how that formed, and I've been really privileged and lucky to be able to maintain those relationships through the last 5 years. That includes my adoptee community. And so as we scale out to like kind of the world and thinking about it, when I first had like my moments of consciousness, critical consciousness about my identity, first started to explore community, the Korean adoptee community, that's what I was seeking. And so I find this on Facebook, and I am an addictive personality.
Mhm.
I'm also like crave acceptance. A lot of this has to do with my adoption stuff, but yada yada yada. When I like my, I say this with all love. That was one of the most tumultuous periods of of this whole journey. Was that initial like 6 months in the community because I was learning very quickly how many different experiences that there were from Korean adoptees. I was also learning that there were two pretty strong camps of anti-adoption completely and pro-adoption completely.
Mhm.
People weren't really doing a lot of gray stuff, as far as I could tell. Um, and I found myself interacting with groups who were telling me I was only going to be in this community if I would go down one of those paths.
It
And
feels very
so
binary too. It feels like
yes,
it loses
very
context. Yeah,
binary.
right.
It's
Hmm.
either this way or it's this way. There was no
Yeah,
other way. And
yeah.
so that was not a great experience. I got really lucky that I met Jerry and I met KJ and I met Nathan, and we were able to start the Janchi Show, and I was able to build community that way. I'm actually giving a keynote next month about how to find your community in your community,
That's
and that's
awesome.
kind of what happened. But to answer your question about my relationship, like with the Korean adoptee community, it's really interesting. I love my CADs, and I love like organizations like Korean Adoptee and Adoptive Family Network, like the Association of Korean Adoptees out in San Francisco. I love those folks, and I love my CAD community. I also am not. I personally don't want to be only in my CAD community. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, I am really interested in how do we continue to diversify and bring about nuance to this experience? And I think for me, especially because of that initial experience that I had in Korean adoptee spaces, I am just much more interested in moving in that way. And that has made my relationships just be um, just be. I won't say at arm's length. I will just say like when I love to be in those spaces. When I'm in those spaces and get invited to come in, it's always a great time, and we always have really incredible discussions. And what I've been building has I think it goes beyond just the Korean adoptee community or the Korean adoptee aspect of the adoptee community, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, no, this is like a really important dive into like the different layers of each of these communities, but also like getting more light of what the Korean adoptee looks like because it's not like this one size fits all. And I think
A
this is
hundred
something that
percent.
we have to keep telling ourselves with any community, like it's not a one size fits all mentality. I mean, there's so many intersecting backgrounds, identities that play into it, whether it's disability, queerness, trans,
Yep.
different multiracial um experiences. And yeah, I think about um I think about like how this has always um like where trauma gets brought up quite a bit, like into these spaces that like I'll give you an example. I think when I first started getting involved with the Cambodian community, like nearly a
Yeah.
decade ago, I was invited to a Cambodian New Year's party in April because we celebrate Cambodian New Year's during that time. And next thing you know, like I started seeing people. This was my first time being at an event like this in a really long time. And I think all of a sudden it really triggered me. And
Mm,
I was like, um, volunteering. I was actually like, getting the table set. And next thing you know, I was like, I have to leave. I literally had to leave. I literally ran out and I just started crying. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I feel like my past is coming back to haunt me. Like this whole reminder that I was not enough, that I couldn't speak. And I was terrified of seeing people that I knew from the community finally seeing me after like a decade. And so I was absolutely terrified. And I had a friend who basically comforted me, called me, and was convincing me to come back. And I eventually did. And it turned out okay, but I needed to realize how much that I had to unpack
mm,
before stepping into those spaces. And also the power of having a friend that really understands and gets you. And I think that's also very important to name too. So
a
it's like,
100%.
yeah, do you feel that way when you go into like Korean spaces or Asian American spaces where you're like, shit, this is too much for me. I gotta leave, you know?
100%. I will say more so in adoptee spaces than like
Mm,
Korean or Asian American spaces. Like sometimes in adoptee spaces, and it is, I will say, the majority of it has to do with some form of trauma being shared.
mm,
Like there are some times where it's just like this is too much. Like this is
mm,
way too much, and I gotta go. And I I will say that because I will always empower someone to do the same thing.
mm,
If I was given a if I was up on if I was at the con conference and I was
mm,
doing a panel or I was doing something up on stage or something where there was an audience and somebody had to leave because it was too much, I would never be upset at that person.
mm,
I would, if
right.
anything, I'd be like, get out of here. Like, go wherever you need to go. I will help you. Whatever that looks like, because we
Mm,
all handle and react to stuff differently. And I think the fallacy of community sometimes is that we want to generalize the way that we react
mm,
and impacted by things. And I
mm,
think that I think the fallacy of community sometimes is that we like to generalize the way that we are impacted by
mm,
something. And we like to look at someone who has a differing reaction as being an outlier instead of affirming them in their reaction and
mm,
meeting them with just like a listening ear and love.
mhm,
I think a lot of
mhm,
times we are informed by our own trauma and the harm done to us,
mhm,
and then we have bias and judgment when we meet
mhm,
other people in the
mhm,
way that they react to something.
mhm,
And it can be really difficult to set that aside and meet someone in that space. But I think, especially because we come from a community experience or we come from a lived experience that is rooted in separation from family at the start,
mhm,
I think it kind of behooves people who have been in the community, I think, to be very aware of that. And
mhm,
I think what can be very disheartening sometimes in adoptee spaces, but in any space,
mhm,
is when someone who is quote unquote a veteran
mhm,
in this arena is actually the person that perpetuates the most harm.
mhm,
And I think like
mhm,
that can be a really difficult thing to contend with because those folks are generally ones that end up touching like new people first.
mhm,
Because they're visible, they're loud.
mhm,
They generally make sense to people who are coming to ideas for the first time.
mhm,
I mean, you can look at right-wing politics like we were talked about at the beginning. Like
mhm,
to some people who have felt marginalized, who have felt isolated, wild things can be justified in your brain. The wildest thing you can
yes.
justify in your mind if somebody else is saying it and it makes sense coming out of their mouth.
Mm,
And
mm,
you're not looking at it any further than just what's being said at face value. And so, like, and that's a problem. Like, that's a big problem.
mhm,
Uh, and it becomes infinitely more of an issue when people are actively like operating in that way in community. I don't think that that's the case most of the time in spaces that I operate in. But I would be lying if I said that it wasn't happening at all.
mm,
So. I think that's what I think when I'm approaching these spaces, when I feel like I can become overwhelmed because I very much can be.
Mhm.
I have gotten very comfortable in being like, I'm going to leave. And I would
Mhm.
always empower somebody to do that too and never have to explain or justify.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important to think about how do you gracefully exit out of the situation and be like, look, this is not my time yet. And also, like, as a person with a platform, as you with a platform, I also feel, especially with the privileges that I have had, I also feel it's very important to also decenter your ego
Mm,
and really pay close attention to the people that are impacted and just give them space to talk, ask questions, really be attuned to their experiences because like I do think that there is a problem when people with bigger platforms tend to ignore or ignore the nuances of our community. And I do think
for
there's a
sure.
problem. I don't want to spend time naming names. I don't think I need to do that. But I do think that there's a lot of that really needs to be reined in. And how do we model different ways? And that's not to say that our way is the right way. I feel like we also have to be open to different avenues and different methods and also different nuances that people come with that we, have to be very mindful of. And this is something that I've always respected about you because I think
Thank
that
you.
you have always been very aware and continue to be aware of your privilege and the way you communicate with folks. I know, like, um, for the Korean culture these days, it's got to feel very disorienting when you see non-Korean people really get into their K-pop. And I'm very curious to know what it does to a person like you in a sense, because, like, as someone that's trying to be more comfortable in my Vietnamese and Cambodian identity. And, Vietnamese is more like the V-pop culture has not taken off yet. But I know when
Yeah.
it comes to food, everyone talks about, oh yeah, let's go get some banh mi or let's get some pho, from non-Vietnamese people. It's almost very
Mhm.
casual. And like maybe 20 years ago, I would have just been like, wow, I would never have guessed that. But now when you're seeing this influx of K-pop, K-drama, what does that feel to you when you start seeing that, when you're seeing it from non Korean folks that are consuming it?
Um, that's a great question. I love it for the creators, the creatives who are getting this kind of exposure. I think that's awesome. And I think we need it just from an entertainment perspective. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff that's made outside of America. Like, we need to be experiencing
Hmm.
that as well. I think I think when I encounter folks who are consuming Korean culture in the way that they are right now, who are not themselves Korean, it makes me think about experiences that I've had where, I've been a bartender at a lot of different places, but like, a not a common occurrence that I would have when I was a bartender was somebody would come up and ask me where I was from. Classic Asian situation.
Hmm.
And so I would share, and then they would inevitably, I would say, I'm from Korea, and they would inevitably say, oh,
I
well,
know.
do you speak Korean? Or like, have you been to Korea? Or some sort of question about Korean. And then I would have to give them a truncated version of the I'm adopted, so I don't know. I grew up in a white family, yada, yada, yada.
Hmm.
And then one of two things would happen. They would either become the arbiter and expert on all things Korea and would be very upset that I had never been to and I needed to go. Or they would not understand that me being adopted and like what I had just quickly explained did not make me the expert on Korean culture and would continually ask me questions about Korea that I was not equipped to answer.
Hmm.
And so that is kind of what I think about when I
Mm.
think about the way people are consuming Korean pop culture right now. And I also realize that that is my one very influenced perspective.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
Hmm.
I do think that we could probably draw some parallels to the way that non-black people appropriate black pop culture or have
Hmm.
appropriated black culture in basically every single medium and form.
Hmm.
Um, I think people are a little bit more respectful and a little less appropriative with with Korean culture than they are with Black culture. However,
Hmm.
I can't help but think about some sort of appropriative aspect to it. And it
Mhm.
always puts me back into those spaces because I still am not the expert on Korean stuff, and I
Mhm.
still struggle with that. And so I think about that, and then one last thing I'll add, one third point is just like I do like it because it maybe makes it easier for me to introduce my kid to Korean stuff in that way. And so we can kind of go into it together, which I know adoptees who are parents have approached it in that way. And it's been really, really impactful and fun for people outside of their circle, like myself, to be able to experience and see
Mhm.
secondhand. So,
Yeah. And I think it can be so frustrating when you get the where are you from and then thinking to yourself, okay, what's it to this person? And I think for me, I view it with a lot of suspicion, especially as I've gotten older. I think medication lately because it has gotten me
mm,
very sassy and very mouthy. So I'm more like, yeah, so what's your point? What do you want to know? I mean, if I go to say
yeah,
Vietnamese before I even say it, it's like, what's your relationship to it? What's your curiosity? Because if you're gonna say like, well, I eat pho, well, then good for you. So does so many other people. So tell me something that I don't know, And I
yeah,
and I think that I get some of the fierceness from like watching old Madonna interviews and Grace Jones, and I feel like, yeah, I want to be them, and I mean, I may not ever be their level, but I want to get some of that energy
sure.
because I feel like that's me taking back my identity that I felt was stolen from me and you. And
Yes,
and I
yes,
think that's part of the anger that I have sometimes that I go with, but I'm also like, okay, I gotta be gentle to myself. I don't want to stay in this anger lane all the time. But I think like this year, I have been learning Vietnamese for the first time as a
nice.
42-year-old. And I like at the end of last year, like I started making friends in Vietnam, and I'm, connecting with other Vietnamese folks, Cambodian folks, for a while I've been doing that. I'm very curious to know, like, when you decide to go to Korea, like with your family, have you already started making friends in the old family homeland? Um and what is it that you're looking to, you talk about K-pop
Yeah,
with your child, but I'm very curious about for your own enjoyment, for your own pleasure, not for, trying to be like a certain way that you felt like you had lost. But like for me,
yeah.
I think like part of the language is to make connections. Like I do not care if I'm a fluent speaker. I don't have the expectation of it. If I speak enough, at least I feel like I can tap into something that I may not have gotten.
Yeah. That's a great, I mean, I aspire to reach that level of um like confidence in how I am speaking because I still like with language in particular, I don't really care about like if I mess something up with food,
Hmm.
maybe like a cultural custom or something, but like language in particular, I feel a lot of shame around it, like because
Hmm.
I can't speak it. And I don't
Hmm.
really say that out loud very much, but like I do feel pretty ashamed that I have
Yeah.
not been able to pick it up. And I've taken some classes, I've done some stuff, but like I've not invested the time really needed to be able to start getting better, but like it just feels impossible to me and I
Hmm.
feel that shame every time I approach it. And it gets double when I'm in Korea or
Yeah.
it doubled when I was in Korea. Even though I did experience some things where I would just speak a word or two because I know like four words.
Hmm.
Um, and I would be received warmly. I will
Hmm.
say I didn't really feel like I was being ostracized by other people who were like, "Oh,
Hmm.
this is a Korean American,"
Yeah.
in Korea. That was nice.
Yeah.
My giveaway was I'm a sweater. So like it was like 100 degrees in July and I was pouring sweat in
Hmm.
shorts and a t-shirt and everybody else walking around in like baggy cargo pants and sweatshirts and not
Hmm.
sweating. And I was like, okay. Anyways, I do have some friends over there that live in Korea. Most of them are adoptees.
Hmm.
Most of them I don't know are
Hmm.
going to be permanently there. So
Wow.
when my family just ends up making the trip to Korea, I don't know what that kind of circle will look like. And I do think I appreciate you sharing your
Hmm.
journey with Vietnamese and like how you're using that to
Hmm.
as a springboard. I think I might try that. I think that might be a good foundation for me to build from, as
Hmm.
opposed to just being like, man, I just want to learn it because I think I should. It'd be good
Yes.
for knowing friends and people over there when we go. So
Mhm.
I like it. Thank you for that.
I think that is something that I had to change that mindset, from that I have to or I feel the guilt of,
Yeah.
which I have, I mean, like my grandma never spoke a word of English and she lived until I was 35. Last couple of years was dementia. And I'm like, I was a full grown ass adult and I could not have a conversation with it. Now all of a sudden I'm able to like write sentences. Do I get it right? No. I mean, there's so like native speakers are like, what the hell are you trying to say? Because it's a tonal language. But I think
Sure.
that there is beauty and being able to just enjoy it. And also like
Right.
I think there's more beauty it's when it's your own people that give you grace and be like, hey, you
True.
know what? Like, hey, I'm happy to practice with you. And like I know that there's like plenty of Vietnamese folks that speak English quite well and I we converse. But then I'll be like, hey, do you mind if I text you in Vietnamese? I'm like, yeah, sure. It's not a big deal. I'm not, they're not making fun of me.
Mm.
It's like, okay, well, this is what you could be saying. This is the textbook version versus this way. And like,
Yeah.
and I think that has slowly eased down, my anxiety and the imposter feeling that I have. And I think that's something that you and I are, continuing to undo and try to like, see what opportunities there are to get us to a place that um offers us that curiosity. And
For sure.
and also like now that you have been doing the conversation piece podcast, which is now available, what was the genesis in starting that work? I know you had talked about wanting to start your own project, but what was the genesis in starting that, and why Indianapolis? What is about Indianapolis to a lot of people that we don't know about? I haven't been in Indianapolis myself, really. So I've been in Indiana, but never.
Just 3 hours up the road, bro.
I
Calm
know,
down.
I know, I know.
Hey, we have some pretty good pho here, to be honest.
Mm,
So
mm,
anytime you're here, I will treat you to some good Vietnamese food that we have in the
good.
city. Okay. So I started conversation piece because I wanted full creative control over something of my own after having done the Janchi Show for a couple of years. And it was like this is like near the end of 2022, so still pretty not like fully locked down, but like still kind of like not going out a bunch.
Mm,
So I was still doing this podcast virtually, and the what I was gonna do was just talk to my friends about whatever they wanted to talk about.
mm,
So no plan, no strategy, just blah. And so I was doing that, and I was having a good time. But about 6 months in, I was like, I think I want something like to be an entrepreneur, and I think I want to do it with this podcast. I forgot I was in this place. Turn the lights back on.
That's
Uh,
hilarious. That's
that is
hilarious.
hilarious.
You got all kinds of things happening to you.
Love it for me. And so 6 months in, I was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I think I should have done that with this platform. And so I'm not gonna do a new one. I'm just gonna do it with this.
Mhm,
And so I had been going to LA and New York and
mhm,
DC with Jerry to other Asian American events
mhm,
and experiencing Asian America in other places. And at first, when I was going, people would always ask me where I was coming in from, and I'd say Indiana, and they would be like, "Haha, there's Asian people in Indiana," and I would go, "Haha, there are." Like I used to
mhm,
think that there weren't too.
mhm,
Well, after about a year of that, I was like, I had been meeting the diaspora like I had been talking about, and I was like, okay, there are Asian people here, and I'm tired of this joke.
mhm,
Um, and so I was at an event. I'll never forget. I was at an event, and somebody asked me that, and I finished the conversation, and I thought in my head, I go, I'm in Indianapolis for a reason. I go, I don't know what the re I don't know why I've been in Indy, but I know now I've been in Indy for a reason. And I think that reason is to let all these motherfuckers know about the Asian people that are here in this
mhm,
city. And so that was kind of the impetus for wanting to be solely focused in Indy in general.
mhm,
Then making that decision, I was like, okay, I'm going to use the podcast to talk about Indianapolis because I don't know anybody here. I
mhm,
never built community while I lived here before. I did not diversify the friend group that I was in. So I'm kind of starting from scratch. And I think the only way I'm really going to be able to do this outside of just going outside is to invite people onto the show and hopefully they come and hopefully I do a good job. And I got really, really lucky in December of 2023 and got three super incredible guests: Olivia West, Samson Livingston, and Byron Horton, aka Skip. We had three fantastic conversations. And from there, I was like, okay, we're going to do this. I found a team, a videographer and sound engineer to help me like fully produce an in-person show. And that was just, and like through these conversations of getting to know people of all different industry, background, demography of Indianapolis, like I just really started to see how much creative, like, I don't even want to say energy. I don't even like culture, creative culture
Hmm.
that lived here, that lived in the soil of Indianapolis. I also saw how the city itself, I felt like you could see history of other places and things in Indy. Like you could
Hmm.
see parts of like New York or West Coast history in the city in the way that people transplanted themselves here and brought that culture with them, or in the ways that we have been like influenced by major metropolitan cities. So Indianapolis specifically was designed to reflect DC, Washington, DC, the layout of DC.
Hmm.
So it's kind of the same. We got a big circle in the middle. We got like branching things that go out in all different ways. It's really kind of interesting. Um, but the truth of the matter is, like Indianapolis is really thought over, like Indiana as a whole, most of the Midwest, not Chicago, it's thought over as flyover, like
Hmm.
flyover country.
Hmm.
And I think if you're really, and I say this about, I won't say this just about Indy, but I think I'll say this about everywhere. If you really think that, I think that you need to get in your car and drive through all of those places
Hmm.
because I will guarantee you, you are going to find something that is going to really like reshape the way that you think about not just the city of Indianapolis, but the entire state of Indiana.
Hmm.
Um, we're the blue dot in the Red Sea. I
Hmm.
think Chicago's a little similar. I think most of like Southern Illinois, I think is pretty conservative.
Pretty
Yeah.
much, yeah. Hmm.
And I think like that's a stereotype. Like that's a
Hmm.
narrative about Indianapolis. And I think that there is like just the idea that because we're in the middle of the map, because we're flyover country, it's easier to get tax breaks there for your corporation. So we're going to headquarter there. It's
Hmm.
easier. It's for this, that, and the other. And I think the real is that Indianapolis is made up of a bunch of people
Hmm.
who have had to fight and scrap their way to continue to exist and be there, and not only be and exist there, but thrive there.
Hmm.
I'm talking about like the way that gentrification and redlining like destroyed black communities here, and they're still here. They're
Hmm.
still doing the thing. The way that East, South, and Southeast Asian communities have somehow found their way to
Hmm.
Indiana, to
Hmm.
Indianapolis, and have found and built pockets of community for themselves. I'm talking about like the Komai people in on the South Side, up in Fort Wayne, like the amount of people that are not just your white
Hmm.
rural farmer, conservative Christian that exist here um, is really, really astounding. And as much as people rag on the lack of food culture here, we do have some pretty world-class food. So
Hmm.
I would say, out of all of those things, like Indianapolis gets a bad rap because people are, it's a layover city.
Hmm.
People pop in and pop out. If you are going to, so I say that actually, I got to add some more context. It's like that because we don't do a good job of investing in our small business infrastructure, our small
Hmm.
businesses in general, and
Hmm.
uplifting and supporting our communities that already live here.
Hmm.
We only invest and support mainly one-off big events, Super Bowl, Taylor Swift. Uh, we have
Hmm.
WrestleMania right now. A lot
Hmm.
of sports stuff, a lot of concerts, and in between there, it's like there's like, oh, there's nothing going on. Well, there is a lot going on.
Hmm.
It's just that we don't get a lot of support from the city or the state itself
Hmm.
to be able to let people know about that. So we just got to do it. And I think the cool thing about Indy is that you can find community sustaining itself here, in spite of the lack of institutional funding from other
Hmm.
people. So you're going to find incredible pockets of community. You can find some really, really good food here. And yeah, I don't know. I could go on about it for days, but lots of
Yeah,
cool stuff in Indianapolis.
I really appreciate you, breaking the conventional stereotypes that a lot of city people have of like or like blue states have of like, red states, especially like blue states and red states, I
For
should say.
sure.
Because like I do have a problem when like, yeah, you're also crapping on the people who are actually doing the work, fighting for communities. Like, like Texas. I mean, everyone talks about Texas, but I'm like, yeah, but you got Houston, you got Dallas, you got,
Yeah.
El Paso and Austin, those communities that are doing a lot of like really interesting communities that are doing important civic engagement work. And I think it's important to name a lot of the different things that are happening in communities that we don't expect. Like, would I expect a Cambodian restaurant to be in Cleveland, Ohio, or Cincinnati? Not off the bat, but I feel like these are the stories that we have to hear.
A
Um,
hundred percent.
because I mean, like I have learned from like other Asian community members who live in like in Iowa to like other parts of the Midwest, like, they're part of these stories. And I think, like I've had them tell me like, yeah, I'm so glad that I have a podcast I could listen to. This is the only time I feel very connected to my
Mm.
culture outside of like the little bubble that I'm in. So I think it's very important to like really highlight and name that, and that it's not the Asian experience is not strictly to coastal cities. I think
Yeah,
that is.
well, I think like specifically speaking to our Asian diasporic experience, like Indianapolis and Indiana specifically as a state, but almost all of Indianapolis, I think you can find, I might be a little bit wrong on the stat, but I think at least 45 of the 50 countries of Asia represented somewhere in
Mm,
Indy or Indiana. And I
wow.
think people like, and like when I learned that, I was shocked. I
Hmm.
was shocked. And then I was also very ashamed of myself for not knowing that and for not being aware of just how many people from our diaspora are here in my city, in my state.
Hmm.
And the reason I said at that gathering that I was in Indianapolis for a reason and wanted to bring visibility, and it was because what I've noticed here in Indiana, and the reason why we don't have more visibility is that our diaspora is itself a little bit fractured. Siloed is the way that we like to talk about it here.
Hmm.
We go into our own pockets and we
Hmm.
don't have a lot of connective infrastructure.
Hmm.
And so we have a lot of organizations. I don't know that we have a lot of organizational communication. I don't know that we do much stuff outside of our annual galas
Hmm.
or outside of Lunar New Year or
Hmm.
Chuseok or whatever the holiday is.
Hmm.
I don't really see us doing a lot. Now, are there more things happening? Yes. And if Indianapolis, the blue city or the blue dot in the hub does not where all of these Asian folks are represented, does not have a cohesive, connected, communicative community in that area. How is Patrick, the Korean adoptee who is growing up an hour and a half north of here
Hmm.
in complete isolation, going to ever know that there is potentially something just a stone's throw away for him
Hmm.
or his family to be able to access?
Hmm.
He's not going to, because if he comes across maybe the Chinese American Association here and they're not communicating with the Korean American Association here, how am I
Hmm.
supposed to get connected with them?
Hmm.
Are they gonna help me get connected to them? Or are they gonna be like, sorry, like that's not a thing? Or are they just gonna give me the information? Like, if we're not communicating with each other, people fall through the cracks.
Hmm.
And right now, literally right now, is a time we cannot have people falling through the cracks.
Right.
They are making cracks for people to fall into, and they are
Hmm.
pushing them in there. We can't be doing that. So, like, we
Hmm.
have to do the work of getting connected,
Hmm.
of being in communication with each other. So that way, people, not just in other cities and states and places, but people within our own city and state
Hmm.
know what is available to them, what is accessible, what kinds of opportunities there are to just find belonging. You
Hmm.
said at the beginning, belonging, like
Hmm.
to just find somebody who looks like you,
Hmm.
like, and you can maybe have a conversation with. Like, I didn't even know that that was a thing that was
Hmm.
possible
Hmm.
until I was 25.
Hmm.
And even then, I was still rejecting my identity. Like, but when growing up, absolutely not. I would have thought you'd have to go to Asia in order
Hmm.
to do that,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
just tells you how limited my scope was.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's because and I'm not saying that like we have not had incredible Asian American activists and organizations and people in Indiana and in the city of Indianapolis who have done incredible things.
All I'm saying is that there is an opportunity for us to be stronger together.
Hmm.
And until we latch onto that opportunity and really create that infrastructure, we're going to lose people. And right now we can't afford to lose anybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate you shedding a lot of light into the culture of Indianapolis and also the way it is uh, being amplified and the way it's being viewed as from an outsider and also from an insider lens. And the only thing I will say, even though I haven't been in Indianapolis, I've always had an anti-Indianapolis bias only because I've always hated the Pacers and the Colts.
Hey, that's
Um,
okay. That's an
but
that's an okay reason.
I will say that I used to hate Reggie Miller. Honestly, I love him so much as a broadcaster. I love him, and I'm like, yeah, I have forgiven him for that pushing of Michael Jordan in Game 4, which I have not forgiven him for, and I wish that
You
Jordan
just
had.
said you did forgive him.
Well, okay, yeah, I know. Okay, you know what? There's still some feelings. I still don't want to watch that. I do not watch that,
Understandable.
even though, yeah, we know that we had won Game 7, went to the NBA Finals. Y'all know what happened. But yeah, I still have my moments. But I will say that, weirdly enough, I hate the Knicks even more. So it was weird for
Perfect.
me to actually root for Indiana because I really cannot stand Knicks fans. I think they're insufferable. I'm sorry for people listening. I might lose some of my streaming numbers. I don't care. I really don't care. You can hate me all you want. But like, but yeah, and also the Colts being the Bears too in the Super Bowl.
Sure.
I remember I had a family friend that bought an Indianapolis Colt t-shirt from Indiana to troll me on that year, and I
Nice.
was a little upset about that. So, but I will say, yeah, what projects are you currently working on within conversation piece and outside of it? I know you're doing like keynotes, you're doing a lot of speaking engagements as well. I was wondering what else are you looking to do in the next several months?
Yeah, so I've actually been doing the show live. Started that once a month. I started doing that in May, and that has been really awesome. So I just locked in the last two guests for this year. So those announcements will be coming soon. But the live show has been really, really fun. I've been able to partner with some really cool people or some really cool businesses here in the city to not only bring cool conversations to people, but make it accessible and like super fun and impactful for those businesses. So excited to continue doing that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we're gonna do a big ass market, AAPI night market in the Circle Center
Mm,
at Monument Circle next year. Fingers crossed.
mm, mm.
I'm gonna speak it. Everything my heart desires is manifesting into reality. It's one of my last
Oh,
guests. So I had on in the studio. She has affirmation cards. She gave me that. So
that's
we're
great.
manifesting that market. And then, yeah, I'm just trying to speak and be involved in community organizations a little bit more. I will be speaking, I'll be at well, actually, no. I'm speaking at virtually for the Adoption Knowledge Affiliates Conference, annual conference in November, and then the week after, I'll be in New York for the Adoptee Film Fest, which is the second version of that, or the second time of that, and then the that weekend, I'm actually hosting a conference, the first of its kind, leadership summit for adoptees and former foster youth
Hmm.
in Minneapolis. So. Lots of cool stuff like that coming up.
Hmm.
I'm also really interested in figuring out. Actually, just kidding. I will tell you about this one last thing. Um, Last year, I was in a program that paid me to think of an idea, and it took me 4 of the 5 weeks of the program to realize that I didn't have to make something. I just had to develop the idea. And so the idea that I came up with is a storytelling archive. And so what this is essentially vignettes of the Asian diaspora here. Folks from the Asian diaspora who want to share their story about what it means, what their story has been in Indianapolis as an Asian American, and whatever that might look like. Just sitting down in front of a camera, having a quick conversation, capturing that lives on the internet for
Hmm.
people to look at. I was inspired by Glenn Morey, Korean adoptee. He did a project very similar called Side by Side,
Hmm.
where he talked to, I think, over 100 some adoptees and foster youth from the Korean foster care system. And that was really impactful for me when I first started this work. I always wanted to do something similar. And that would be my first time producing like a film project. So I need to be more farther along than I am on that, but I am currently working on that. I'm excited to hopefully start rolling that out at the beginning of the year. And yeah, so be on the lookout for that. So
Mm,
we've been talking about indie. I hope this could be a way to show people, especially outside of our city, just how much we have here.
hmm
So yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely like to make a visit to Indianapolis. I have been inspired by your podcast. Every time I would listen to it, it's like, God, I really need to find a weekend to do it, because I do like doing a little road trip. I mean, I'll go to Minneapolis, I'll go to other parts of Indiana, Wisconsin. But like, yeah, I would love to experience what you have been sharing. And I think it's amazing what that
Bring it
difference
in.
can do, right? And one last question that I have is, if you had to go back in time to your 30-year-old self, what would you say to that person now?
Oh man.
I'm sorry to do this to you, but I know that this is the interesting last 5 years that you got there.
This has been an interesting 5 years. Build a time machine so you can skip 2025 to 2029,
Hmm.
even though I haven't lived those last 3 years. No.
Mhm.
I think what I would say to 30-year-old me is I feel like this is what I say to young me too, but I think
Mhm.
he needs to hear it right now.
Mhm.
I think what I would say to him is you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna be okay because you're gonna experience a lot of stuff in the next year. That's gonna be a lot. In the next 3 years, it's gonna be a lot, and in the next 5 years, it's gonna be a lot. And at each of those milestones, you're going to feel really great. And you're also going to feel more lost, I think, than you were when you were lost. So
Mhm.
I think, I think when I think about who you are right now,
Mhm.
I think you need to know that it's going to be all right.
Mhm.
And yeah, we'll leave it at that. You'll be good.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your time. All
Thank
the
you,
best
Randy.
to you in your work. And I'm so glad to finally have this conversation with you after the last few years. So, really much best of luck to you moving forward.
Same to you. It's been a privilege and a joy. Anytime I get to chat with you, not just about my story, but to chat with you specifically, it means a lot to me. So thank you.